The failed diplomacy. Humanity had always dreamed of peace. For years, humans had strived to reach out to the stars, hoping to forge alliances with the alien civilizations they knew existed beyond their solar system. After all, war had consumed Earth for centuries, fighting for survival, resources, and power. So when the opportunity for peace arose, humanity grasped it with both hands. The human delegation, led by Ambassador James Taylor, arrived at the massive alien city on the distant planet of Urona. It was a world of wonders, where towering cities stretched into the skies, glowing with strange lights. The air was thick with the smell of unfamiliar spices, and the streets hummed with life. It was everything humanity had hoped for, an advanced civilization eager to make peace with them. The aliens, known as the Eurythians, were a peaceful race, or so the humans thought. Their leaders had sent messages of goodwill, suggesting a meeting to discuss a peaceful alliance. Ambassador Taylor, along with a team of diplomats, was ready to finalize an agreement that would ensure the safety and prosperity of both species. They were prepared to offer knowledge, technology, and resources in exchange for mutual cooperation. The peace talks began in a grand, circular hall. The walls were adorned with strange symbols and glowing murals, depicting Eurythian history. It was a place meant to inspire awe, and Ambassador Taylor couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the surroundings. The Eurythians, tall and elegant, with skin that shimmered like polished marble, stood in front of them with calm smiles. Their leader, High Elder Zykor, was poised and wise, radiating an air of understanding. "We come in peace," Ambassador Taylor began, standing in front of the Council of Eurythians. His voice echoed in the silence of the hall. "We seek to work together, to build a future of peace, prosperity, and mutual respect. Humanity offers its hand in friendship." High Elder Zykor nodded, his eyes gleaming with what appeared to be gratitude. "We, too, desire peace, Ambassador. We have watched your species with great interest, and we believe that cooperation between us will bring great things." The room fell quiet as Taylor continued speaking. He was confident, feeling the weight of humanity's hopes resting on his shoulders. But little did he know that the hope for peace would soon be shattered. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the hall, and the floor shook beneath their feet. The Eurythian council members looked at each other in confusion, while Taylor's team scrambled to their feet. The walls trembled, and the lights flickered. Before anyone could react, the doors to the hall burst open with terrifying force. In marched Eurythian soldiers, their bodies armored in dark, menacing exoskeletons. Their faces were hidden beneath helmets, but their eyes burned with fury. They raised weapons that hummed with energy, weapons the humans had never seen before. Ambassador Taylor's heart pounded. The situation had turned hostile in an instant, but he couldn't understand why. They had come here to make peace. Why were the Eurythians turning on them? "Do not resist," a voice called from the back of the room. It was Zykor, the same leader who had promised peace, but now his voice was cold, devoid of the warmth it once held. "We are not your allies." "We never were," Zykor declared. "You should have known that peace was never truly an option." Taylor's mind raced as he realized the truth. The Eurythians had deceived them. They had lured humanity to their planet, offering peace as a trap, and now they were preparing to destroy them. The suddenness of the betrayal left Taylor speechless. How had they misjudged this so terribly? What had gone wrong? The Eurythian soldiers advanced, their weapons ready. In that moment, Taylor knew they had to fight, but they were unprepared, outnumbered, and under-equipped. The advanced weapons the Eurythians wielded were far superior to anything humanity had in their arsenal. The Eurythians had made sure of that. The betrayal was complete. The diplomats and soldiers scrambled to escape as the Eurythians fired upon them. The once peaceful hall became a battlefield. The human team was caught off guard, struggling to defend themselves against an enemy they had trusted, but no matter how hard they fought, they were overpowered. In the chaos, Ambassador Taylor managed to reach a communication device and send a distress signal to Earth. The message was simple but urgent. The peace talks have failed. The Earthians have turned on us. We are under attack. Send help. As the Earthian soldiers closed in, Taylor's team made a desperate retreat. They had no choice but to flee, leaving behind their hopes for peace, now shattered. The once promising alliance had crumbled, and now humanity faced a war they hadn't prepared for. But the Earthians weren't done with them yet. The escape wasn't easy. As they fled, they saw the destruction unfolding behind them. The Earthians had sealed off their escape routes, trapping them on the planet. There was no place to run, no safe haven. Humanity had been caught in a snare they didn't even know existed. Ambassador Taylor and his team managed to escape the planet with their lives, but they had lost something far more important: their faith in peace. The Earthians had shown their true colors, and now humanity had no choice but to prepare for war. Their dream of peace had been crushed, and the fire of retaliation began to burn within them. The galaxy would soon know what it meant to anger humanity. As they fled into space, Taylor stared at the stars, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the road to peace was now closed. The war was about to begin, and humanity would bring everything they had to make sure they were never betrayed again. Rising tensions. The human fleet was far from prepared for what awaited them. After the devastating betrayal on Ironar, the fragile hope for peace was extinguished, replaced by a growing sense of anger and urgency. Ambassador Taylor's distress message had been sent, but the response from Earth was swift and cold. Prepare for war. The leaders of Earth, stunned and furious, had no choice but to respond with strength. Back on Earth, the world had already begun to mobilize. Humanity was used to surviving under pressure, but this felt different. They weren't just defending their planet. They were defending their very existence. The Earthians, once thought to be peaceful allies, had proven themselves to be ruthless enemies, and now humanity had no choice but to bring the fight to them. Taylor, now a symbol of humanity's defiance, was called back to Earth to help guide the military response. It was clear that the peaceful negotiations had been nothing more than a trap. The Earthians had used their advanced technology to manipulate the humans into believing they sought peace, only to spring a deadly ambush. Taylor knew that their entire strategy needed to change. Diplomacy was dead. The only language the Earthians understood now was power. Earth's leaders, despite their shock, moved quickly to prepare for the inevitable war. A series of emergency meetings were held, and military forces were put on high alert. But even the most experienced generals couldn't ignore the fear gnawing at them. The Earthians were far more advanced than humanity in almost every way, technologically, militarily, and strategically. Their weapons were like nothing humans had seen before, capable of devastating entire fleets with a single shot. Yet, humanity had something the Earthians could never account for: resilience. Time and time again, humans had risen from the ashes of defeat, fighting for survival and adapting to any challenge. In the face of overwhelming odds, humanity thrived. And now, they would need that strength more than ever. Taylor spent long days and sleepless nights in war rooms, working with military strategists to plan their next move. It was clear that humanity could not win this war with mere defense. They had to hit back, hard and fast. They needed something that could tip the scales in their favor, something that would make the Earthians realize they had underestimated humanity's resolve. Then the breakthrough came. In a top-secret research facility, scientists unveiled their creation, an enormous weapon capable of turning the tide of the war. The device was powered by a new form of energy harvested from deep within the core of distant stars. It was a weapon that could destroy entire ships with a single strike, a force so powerful that it could obliterate an entire fleet in seconds. But it wasn't just about the weapon. It was about the message it would send. Humanity wasn't just going to fight back. They were going to show the Earthians what it meant to challenge them. With the new weapon, humanity would prove that peace wasn't the only option. It was time for overwhelming force. As the weapon was prepared, tension spread throughout Earth. The idea of using such a destructive force filled many with dread. Was humanity truly prepared to unleash this kind of power? The fear of becoming the very thing they had once sought to avoid, a race that thrived on violence and destruction, haunted many. But the alternative, in their minds, was clear. If humanity didn't fight back with everything they had, they risked total annihilation. There were moments of doubt, moments where people wondered if they had made a mistake. Perhaps the peaceful path was the right one. But every time that question arose, they were reminded of the destruction they had already faced, the betrayal, the ambush, the loss of so many. Humanity had learned the hard way that sometimes survival meant making difficult choices. As the weapon was tested and the final preparations were made, Taylor stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching as the fleet gathered. It was an impressive sight. Hundreds of ships, each equipped with the best technology humanity could muster. But even more impressive was the fire that burned in the eyes of every soldier, every commander. They had been pushed to the edge, and now they were ready to fight back with everything they had. The Eurythians might have thought they could crush humanity with a single blow, but they had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated the heart of humankind, the unbreakable will to fight for survival, no matter the odds. The message was clear. Humanity would not go quietly into the dark. They would not be erased. They would rise again, stronger than ever. As the fleet set course for the Eurythian homeworld, Taylor turned to his officers, determination in his voice. We may not have chosen this path, but now it's the only one we have. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for our future, and we will make sure the future is ours. The fleet surged forward into the stars, their path set. The war was about to begin, and humanity was ready to show the Eurythians that they had made a grave mistake. The first strike was coming. And this time, humanity would not be caught off guard. A new weapon of destruction. The days leading up to the launch of humanity's first counterattack were tense. The scientists and engineers who had worked tirelessly on the new weapon were exhausted, but their determination never wavered. They knew that the weapon they had created was humanity's last hope for victory, a force unlike anything the universe had ever seen. It wasn't just another weapon. It was the key to surviving this war and proving humanity's place in the galaxy. Ambassador Taylor stood alongside General Marshall, a grizzled veteran of many conflicts, as they observed the final tests of the weapon. The room was filled with engineers and military officers, all eyes fixed on the screens in front of them. The room was silent except for the hum of machinery and the soft beeping of monitoring devices. "This is it," Taylor said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of what was about to unfold. "This is the weapon that will change everything." General Marshall nodded. "It better be. The Eurythians won't be waiting for us to make another move. We have to strike first, or we risk losing everything." The weapon was a marvel of human ingenuity. It was powered by a new form of energy extracted from collapsing stars, an energy source so potent that it could release devastating bursts of destructive force. The energy was harnessed within a massive, sleek structure that resembled a giant cannon mounted on the flagship's front. The weapon was designed to fire a concentrated beam that could decimate enemy ships in an instant, vaporizing them with a single shot. The destructive power it held was incomprehensible, and humanity had no choice but to trust in its strength. As the countdown began, Taylor's heart raced. He knew that this weapon wasn't just about winning the war. It was a statement to the Eurythians and to any other race who might be watching. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They would defend their world at all costs, and they would make sure the Eurythians understood the cost of betraying them. The final test of the weapon came as the fleet gathered in the darkness of space, just outside Eurythian territory. It was time. The target was set, an abandoned asteroid on the edge of the Eurythian system, a perfect test subject. The weapon would fire, and the result would be a sign of things to come. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The voice of the engineer rang out over the intercom, but Taylor's eyes were fixed on the screen in front of him. His fingers gripped the edge of the console as the countdown reached 0. The ship shook as the weapon powered up, its energy core coming to life with a low, menacing hum. Then, in a flash of blinding light, the weapon fired. The beam shot out with such force that the entire ship seemed to shudder under its power. For a split second, everything was silent. And then the asteroid exploded. The explosion was so massive that it seemed to tear the fabric of space itself. In an instant, the asteroid was reduced to nothing more than dust and debris, scattered across the void. The power of the blast sent shockwaves through the fleet, and the engineers cheered in relief. The weapon had worked, and it had exceeded every expectation. But even as the celebration started to die down, a cold realization settled over Taylor. This weapon, as powerful as it was, could only be used once per ship. It was humanity's trump card, its final move. They couldn't afford to waste it. "Prepare for launch," General Marshall said, his voice calm despite the magnitude of the situation. "We've got one shot at this. Let's make it count." And as the weapon hummed to life in the heart of the flagship, ready to deliver its devastating blow, Taylor's resolve solidified. This wasn't just about defeating the Earthians. This was about showing the galaxy what humanity could do when pushed to the brink. The weapon was more than just a tool of destruction. It was a symbol of their strength. The first wave was coming. The weapon was primed, and humanity was about to make its mark. The Earthians would soon know that peace was a far-off dream, and that humanity would not bow to threats or betrayal. This was just the beginning. The firepower humanity had unleashed would change the course of the war, and the galaxy. Forever. Preparing for war. The days before the strike were filled with preparation. The fleet, now armed with the new weapon, stood in the vast emptiness of space, a silent testament to humanity's resolve. Every ship, from the massive warships to the smaller fighters, was on high alert. The commanders, still processing the enormity of what they were about to do, held strategy meetings day and night. This wasn't just any battle. This was humanity's last stand. A chance to prove that they would not be wiped out, that they would not fall into extinction at the hands of a betrayal. Ambassador Taylor stood on the observation deck of the flagship, looking out at the fleet assembled around him. He could see the individual ships, some with their lights dimmed, others ready for battle, each one a microcosm of what humanity stood for. But what was in front of him wasn't just a military force. It was the collective will of humanity, all unified for one cause: survival. As the fleet drifted closer to the Earthian homeworld, the tension grew palpable. For the soldiers and officers on board, this moment had been years in the making. They knew that the Earthians, despite their apparent peace-loving nature, were a deadly and resourceful enemy. Humanity had to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless if they wanted to win. The new weapon, still fresh in the minds of every officer, was the ace in their hand, but it was also a double-edged sword. With such a powerful weapon at their disposal, there were only limited opportunities to use it effectively. It wasn't just about using brute force. It was about strategy, timing, and knowing when to strike. Humanity could not afford a misstep. General Marshall, a battle-hardened leader, paced back and forth in the war room. His face, etched with the lines of many wars, was hard and unyielding. "We need to be ready for whatever the Earthians throw at us. They may have thought they caught us off guard once, but not again. We'll strike before they even know what hit them." Taylor nodded. "We need to hit them hard, and we need to hit them fast. We've learned the hard way that the Earthians don't play by any rules. If we hesitate, we lose." The strategy was simple but risky. The fleet would split into two groups. The first wave would be a distraction, pulling the Earthian forces' attention toward them, while the second group, with the weapon-equipped ships, would slip behind enemy lines. The goal was to take out Earthian command centers, cripple their defenses, and make it impossible for them to mount a serious retaliation. As the preparations continued, The fear among the crew began to rise. They all knew the stakes. If the fleet failed, it wouldn't just mean the end of this mission. It could be the end of humanity. Every ship in the fleet carried the weight of billions of lives, and that burden was enough to make even the most experienced soldiers feel the pressure. But despite the growing tension, there was something else in the air: determination. Humans had faced overwhelming odds before and emerged victorious. It was this resilience that had carried them through the darkest moments of their history. Now it was the only thing that could save them. On the eve of the attack, the entire fleet gathered in silence. There were no grand speeches or declarations. There was no need for them. The crew members knew their role. They knew the importance of what they were about to do. The night before the strike, many soldiers said little, but their eyes told the story: their courage, their fear, and their unbreakable will to survive. Taylor stood at the helm, gazing out into the vast, cold expanse of space. He thought back to the meeting on Irona, where he had believed peace was possible. How naive he had been. But there was no turning back now. The Eurethians had shown their true nature, and it was one of cruelty and deceit. There would be no more talks. The time for peace was over. The time for war had arrived. As the final preparations were made, the crew of the flagship received their orders. It was time to move out. The fleet sprang to life, and the engines of the ships hummed as they powered up, each one preparing to fulfill its mission. The entire crew stood ready, waiting for the signal to launch. Every man and woman aboard knew that they had one chance to make a difference. There was no room for error. "Prepare for launch." General Marshall's voice crackled over the intercom, his tone steady despite the pressure. "This is it, people. We make our move now. For humanity, for Earth. This is our moment. We go in, we hit hard, and we leave nothing behind." Taylor could hear the murmurs of agreement through the comms. The fleet was ready. As the ships began their final approach to the Eurethian homeworld, the tension was unbearable. It was a moment of uncertainty, but it was also a moment of clarity. The fleet would strike, and humanity would make its mark on the galaxy. The plan was set in motion. There was no going back. The final chapter of this war would be written in firepower, and humanity would see if they had the strength to emerge victorious. The first move was humanity's to make. The universe would soon know what it meant to face the full force of the human spirit. The first strike. The darkness of space was broken only by the soft, distant glow of stars. The fleet, now on the move, silently advanced toward the Eurethian homeworld. A cold, quiet resolve filled the air. This was it, the moment humanity had been preparing for, the beginning of the end of their desperate struggle. Each ship in the fleet was a symbol of the human will to survive, and as they approached the Eurethian stronghold, every officer, every soldier, every diplomat knew that the fate of Earth, of humanity, rested on this one attack. On the flagship, Ambassador Taylor stood at the command deck, staring at the holographic map of the Eurethian system. His heart beat steadily, a calm center in the chaos of what was unfolding. He had long since accepted the harsh reality that peace was no longer an option. The Eurethians had made their choice, and now it was time to make theirs. The plan was set, and the countdown had begun. Approaching the Eurethian perimeter, General Marshall's voice came over the intercom, steady as always. "We need to make our move fast. First wave, prepare to engage." The first wave, made up of smaller, faster ships, led the charge. Their mission was to act as bait, drawing the Eurethian forces toward them, while the main strike force, led by the ships carrying the powerful new weapon, slipped behind enemy lines. The fleet was split into two, those who would attack directly, and those who would wait for the perfect moment to strike with overwhelming force. Ambassador Taylor had always believed in strategy, in waiting for the right moment to strike. But in this moment, there was no time for hesitation. The fleet surged forward, and as they closed in on the Eurethian defenses, it became clear that the Eurethians were prepared for a fight. The bright flashes of laser fire began, cutting through the black void of space as the first wave of human ships clashed with the Earthian defenses. The battle had begun. The first wave held its ground, expertly maneuvering, drawing the Earthian forces deeper into the trap. It was a dangerous move, but the humans had no choice. They needed to lure the Earthians in, make them focus their attention on the decoy ships, so the real strike could land with devastating force. As the first wave engaged, Taylor watched through the holographic displays, his hands clenched tightly behind his back. He had no choice but to rely on the skills of his officers, his soldiers. They were the ones who would determine if this battle would be won or lost. The Earthians, formidable in their own right, responded quickly. Their ships were sleek, with weapons of unimaginable power, but their tactics were predictable. They were relentless, pushing forward, believing that their superior technology would overwhelm the humans. But they didn't know what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. The human ships in the first wave fought fiercely, giving everything they had to keep the Earthians distracted. The sky was alive with flashes of energy blasts, explosions rocking the black void of space. Humanity's first taste of battle in this new war had begun, and it was brutal. Yet, the strategy was holding. The Earthians were following the bait, and the main strike force was preparing to make its move. On the flagship, Taylor turned to General Marshall. "Is the weapon ready?" General Marshall nodded. "We're primed and ready to fire, just waiting for the signal." "Give it to them," Taylor said, his voice steady. The moment had arrived. With a flick of a switch, the order was given. The weapon's energy level spiked, filling the ship with a low, thrumming hum. The enormous cannon mounted on the flagship was aligned with its target, the heart of the Earthian fleet. In a flash of light, the weapon fired. The force of the blast was unimaginable. It tore through space, a concentrated beam of energy that sliced through the Earthian ships like a knife through butter. The first Earthian warship caught in the blast disintegrated in an instant, its massive frame obliterated by the power of the weapon. The shockwave from the blast sent ripples through the surrounding space, and the Earthians were stunned. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The fleet, the chaos, the sound of battle, it all stopped. The silence was deafening. Then the Earthians retaliated. Realizing the depth of the human strike, the Earthian forces regrouped quickly. They unleashed a barrage of counterattacks, but the damage had already been done. The first wave of humanity's ships, despite taking heavy casualties, had successfully diverted the Earthians' attention, allowing the main force to land the devastating blow. The fleet's second wave, now emboldened by the power of the weapon, surged forward. With the Earthians still reeling from the unexpected attack, humanity's ships pressed their advantage. The humans pushed back hard, coordinating their attacks with precision. Every shot, every maneuver was designed to exploit the weakness they had just exposed. Despite the overwhelming power of the weapon, the Earthians were not easy foes. They fought back with renewed fury, determined to reclaim the advantage. But the shock of humanity's first strike had left them disoriented, and the battle raged on. The fight was far from over, and there were still many dangers ahead. As the battle continued to unfold, Taylor's mind raced. The weapon had worked, but the Earthians were a force to be reckoned with, and they would fight until the very end. But for the first time in this war, humanity had a real chance. The Earthians had underestimated them, and now humanity had shown them what they were capable of. The tide of the battle had turned. Humanity had struck first, and the message was clear: they would not back down. The Earthians now knew that their peace was gone, and their empire was at war with a race that refused to be broken. The first strike was just the beginning, but the path forward was uncertain. Humanity had proven that they could stand toe-to-toe with their enemies. Now it was time to finish what they had started. A bitter betrayal. The battle had raged for hours. The Earthians, while initially shocked by the destructive power of humanity's weapon, had quickly regrouped. Their military prowess had begun to show as they retaliated with coordinated attacks, seeking to regain their advantage. The vastness of space was filled with explosions, the dark void broken by flashes of laser fire and missile trails. Humanity's forces were holding their ground, but the victory they'd hoped for felt far from certain. On the flagship, Ambassador Taylor stared out at the carnage unfolding before him, his mind working furiously. The weapon had proven to be a game-changer, but it wasn't enough to win the war by itself. The Eurethians were adapting quickly, and their superior numbers were starting to make a difference. The longer the battle went on, the more dangerous it became. But then something unexpected happened. The comm system buzzed, interrupting Taylor's thoughts. A transmission came through, but it wasn't from the Eurethians. It was from one of their own ships, a human ship. His heart skipped a beat as he listened to the message. It was from Captain Eric Moreau, a trusted officer leading one of the flagship's fighter squadrons. His voice crackled through the speakers, but it was filled with urgency and panic. "Ambassador Taylor, you need to listen to me. We have a problem. We've been sabotaged." The word sent a chill down Taylor's spine. Sabotage. This wasn't possible. Their forces were loyal, or so they had thought. "What are you talking about, Captain?" Taylor's voice was tight with fear. He had no time to process the full implications of this message. The war, the betrayal from the Eurethians. They couldn't afford another threat, not now. Some of our officers, some of the higher-ranking crew members, they're working with the Eurethians. They've been in contact with them for weeks, even before the battle started. They're actively trying to undermine us from within. They've sabotaged our systems, weapons, shields, navigation. They've even been planting misinformation. It's a coordinated effort. Taylor's blood ran cold. His mind raced, trying to process what was happening. A traitor within their ranks. How could this have happened? Who could have betrayed them at a time like this? As the shock settled in, Taylor's thoughts turned to the ship's senior officers, to the people he had trusted. General Marshall, Colonel Anderson, and others had been with him from the beginning. Could one of them be responsible for this treachery? "Captain, who is involved?" Taylor asked, his voice demanding answers. The silence on the other end of the line seemed to stretch on for what felt like an eternity before Moreau spoke again. "We're working to identify them, but I think it's someone very high up. Whoever they are, they've gained access to key systems, systems that could cripple us if they're not stopped." Moreau's voice wavered. "We don't have much time. The sabotage is already starting to take effect. Some of the ships are off course. Our weapon systems are failing. It's only a matter of time before the Eurethians notice." Taylor's mind raced with the severity of the situation. Not only were they fighting the Eurethians on the battlefield, but now they had to contend with a traitor among their ranks, someone actively working to ensure their defeat. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Trust had been shattered, and humanity's first victory in the war could quickly be undone. "Captain, hold your position and do not engage the traitors. We'll send reinforcements and counteract the sabotage. I need a full report on the systems that have been compromised," Taylor ordered, his voice cold and controlled despite the rush of emotions swirling inside him. He couldn't afford to panic now. He had to act swiftly. Before Moreau could respond, another transmission came through. This time, it was General Marshall. "Ambassador, we've detected the traitors. We've got the coordinates of the main group responsible. They're attempting to take control of the flagship's command systems." Taylor's stomach dropped. It was happening. Right now, in the heart of their operations. Their enemies were inside the ship. They were vulnerable. "General, we need to neutralize them immediately," Taylor said firmly. "Move in and take them down. Secure the command center. We cannot afford to let them undermine this mission." But as Marshall responded, the flagship suddenly jolted violently. The lights flickered and alarms blared throughout the ship. A massive explosion ripped through the hull, and the crew was thrown into chaos. The sabotage had begun in earnest. "We've lost power to several sectors." Marshall's voice came over the intercom, now tinged with urgency. "We're losing control of the flagship. They've hit the main reactor. We're dead in the water if we don't regain control. Panic erupted among the crew. This was no longer just a battle against the Earthians. They were fighting an internal enemy as well. And as Taylor quickly learned, the sabotage wasn't just limited to the flagship. It was spreading through the entire fleet. Systems were failing. Ships were drifting, vulnerable to enemy fire. The traitors had planted their seeds of destruction everywhere. Ambassador Taylor's thoughts were a blur. Betrayal, sabotage, confusion. Every plan, every hope of a quick victory was crumbling before his eyes. But there was no time for grief, no room for regret. They had to survive this, no matter the cost. Deploy all remaining loyal forces, find the traitors and eliminate them, Taylor ordered. His voice rang with the authority of a leader who would not let his people fall. As the battle continued to rage, humanity was forced to fight on two fronts, their enemy in the stars and the one hidden within their own ranks. The Earthians had underestimated humanity once, and now they had to face not only the might of the human fleet, but the strength of a species capable of rising even in the face of betrayal. But Taylor knew that they had no time to lose. The war was far from over, and every second counted. It was time to act, to take back control, and to make sure that the price of this betrayal would be paid in full. The fight for humanity's survival had just taken an even darker turn. Unstoppable firepower. The internal sabotage had threatened to tear humanity's fleet apart, but they had held on. In the darkest moments, with the traitors undermining their every move, there was a sense of unity among the loyal soldiers and commanders. They fought tooth and nail to regain control of the flagship, pushing back the insurgents who had plotted against them. It was a brutal internal conflict, but slowly the tide turned in humanity's favor. The traitors were rooted out, and their sabotage was neutralized. It was a hard-fought victory, one that cost lives, but it had cleared the path for humanity to fight back with everything they had. Now, with control restored, humanity's fleet was in a position to strike once more. But this time, there was no holding back. The weapon, their last hope, would be used to its fullest extent. There was no longer room for second chances. Ambassador Taylor knew that if they didn't strike decisively now, the Earthians would finish what they had started. With the remaining loyal ships back in formation, the fleet advanced toward the heart of the Earthian armada. The damage was already done. The Earthians, though powerful, had taken heavy losses from the earlier attacks and the sabotage within humanity's fleet. Their pride had been wounded, and Taylor could sense it. They might have thought they had won. They might have believed humanity was fractured, broken. But humanity had proven itself far more resilient than the Earthians could have imagined. "We strike now with everything we've got." General Marshall's voice echoed across the fleet's comms, a promise of swift retribution. For humanity, for Earth, this is our time. As the fleet closed in, Taylor stood at the helm of the flagship, staring into the vast expanse of space. He had no illusions about the destruction that would come next. The Earthians would feel the full force of humanity's wrath. "Initiate the final phase," Taylor ordered, his voice steady with cold determination. The flagship's massive cannon powered up once more, its hum growing louder, the energy within it building to an unimaginable level. Taylor watched the numbers on the screen, his eyes flicking from one readout to the next, ensuring that everything was in place. The Earthian fleet, still recovering from the chaos and confusion caused by the sabotage, didn't realize what was coming. Their ships, though formidable, were scattered, their formations broken. They thought they had time, but in truth, the moment they had waited for, the moment when humanity would unleash their overwhelming firepower, was upon them. With a signal from Taylor, the flagship fired. A beam of energy shot out from the weapon, faster than the eye could follow, and in an instant, a Earthian warship was reduced to nothing more than space debris. The blast was so powerful, so precise, that it sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. the silence of space broken only by the aftershock of the weapon's impact. The first hit was just the beginning. The humans didn't wait. They didn't hesitate. A second shot was fired, and another Earthian ship was obliterated. Then a third and a fourth. The Earthian forces, now reeling from the brutality of the attack, struggled to regain their footing. But it was too late. Humanity's fleet surged forward, emboldened by the success of their weapon. They had hit the Earthians with the full force of their strength, and it was working. The Earthians, for the first time in this conflict, were on the defensive. Their ships began to break apart, their lines faltering. The battle was turning in humanity's favor. But the Earthians weren't ready to surrender just yet. They threw everything they had at the human fleet. Attacks from all sides, desperate and brutal. But humanity was ready. The first strike had shown them that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could hold their ground. And with the power of their weapon, they had made it clear to the Earthians that no matter how many ships they had, they would never defeat the human spirit. As the battle raged on, Taylor's mind never wavered from the task at hand. The weapon was working, and the Earthians were faltering. But there was still much to be done. Despite their advances, the Earthians would not go down without a fight. There would be no easy victory. The humans would have to push through, to fight until there was nothing left standing. Finally, as the last of the Earthian warships crumbled under the weight of humanity's might, the remaining enemy forces retreated. They had been broken. The power of the human fleet and its weapon had proven to be too much for the Earthians to overcome. The tide had turned, and humanity had emerged victorious. The cost had been high. Countless lives had been lost, both from the sabotage and the subsequent battle. But humanity had endured, and the Earthians had learned the hard way that peace with humanity was not a game to be played. They had underestimated the resilience, the strength, and the unbreakable will of humankind. As the last of the Earthian ships disappeared into the void, Taylor exhaled slowly, his heart heavy with the weight of the victory. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. Humanity had won this round, but there would be others. The Earthians had shown them how fragile peace could be, and now, the humans would make sure that they would never be caught off guard again. For now, the stars were quiet. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would not soon forget. When humanity was pushed to the edge, they would rise up, not with words, but with overwhelming firepower. And that firepower had proven unstoppable.